happy to be here and very grateful to the Words Aloud family, to my fellow poets, Stephen and Tanya. I'm going to do 4 poems. They're all about the same length, which doesn't leave, I've got it perfectly timed to leave very little room for preambles, and mine tend to be ambling, so that's a good thing. The first one you mentioned in your introduction, Hazel. It's about a Slovenian cave salamander. I wrote this poem when George Jr., I thought was the worst face in global news. Those were the days, eh? For crying out loud. I remember demonstrating against Reagan when I thought he was the worst thing that... Anyway, the point being that it's not a brand new poem. The more things change. Yeah. Okay, so this poem is about a Slovenian cave salamander, and it's called Human Fish. I want to tell you a story about an amphibian I know. Not right away, though. Let's start with a species closer to home and go slow and see if we can recognize anyone we know. We never crawled out of the cave. It's not in our nature to crave too much sunshine. We never even grew eyes, but blindness has always worked fine for us. We have lungs, we have limbs, we have places to swim. We have all the fresh shrimp we can eat. You've got little hands and feet. We're nobody's masters and nobody's slaves. So why would we crawl out of our caves? The Slovenian cave salamander, Proteus anguinus, was proclaimed by Charles Darwin, who invented evolution, to be a wreck of ancient life. It hadn't changed a bit in several million years, never really felt the need to. It was nobody's food. But from the point of view of evolution, this amphibian had failed to thrive. It had missed the whole point about being alive. You're supposed to have to fight to survive. But Darwin was a human, just like most of us here, except for you aliens and the yeast and the beer. And according to him, aren't we top of the heap? No mind that we're the only apes losing sleep over mistakes we made. The global stakes we've raised to code red. We've let so many down and left so many dead. It's been survival of the fittest, like the man said. And speaking of ingenuity and longevity, we succeed in making the human species the public enemy of practically everybody. We funky monkeys make it highly unlikely that any future generations will see Siberian tigers on safari vacations. So Darwin's assessment of the Proteus as unenlightened and unambitious makes me slightly curious and a little suspicious, especially since these particular salamanders are also known as human fishes. But it's a little bit typical, a little predictable, the traditional views that the ones lower down writhe in the dark, while the ones higher up thrive in the light. One is wrong and one is right. This historical tendency to think in terms of black or white. Down in the cave, the human fish is white and blind. But those who crawl outside grow eyes and their skins turn black in the sunshine. But then again, turning back to the cave, they change from black to white again and once more blind. The human fish thinks with a very old mind, but then it's only ever lived with its own kind. Thin-skinned, four-limbed, skimming over stones, then diving deep as sleep. Four-limbed with lungs, four-limbed with gills. We soak our limbs in oxygen, locate a breathing space within to facilitate communication with outer elements. There's an elemental intelligence which senses the presence of electrical currents in the delicate neurological workings of lower invertebrates. We don't need eyes down here because it's too dark to see. And those lower invertebrates taste mighty fine to me. Proteus anguinus is quite a bit like us, except that one of them managed to stay alive in a jar in a laboratory fridge for 12 years. without food. Dude, how many of you'd make it through week 2? When they finally sacrificed this skinny human fish to science, they found something weird. Its digestive system had completely disappeared. Well, that's pretty adaptable for a salamander accused of lacking evolutionary drive. It did the only thing it could do under the circumstances, to survive, which is something human beings may have in common with the little guy. Even with all the odds against us, we still give it a try. Thin-skinned and living in a cave, thin-skinned without any eyes. Didn't I used to be one of those guys swimming blind with nothing ahead and nothing behind? But somehow at the time, I didn't mind. A long time ago, Plato thought that life on Earth was akin to being chained up in a cave, with the body as the prison and the soul as its slave. Only one knowing the light beyond could be the savior of our hopeless behavior and save our sorry souls from chains of ignorance, which imprisonment seems a little bit silly when so many stay there willingly, watching movies in shadows on the wall. This is your life, your entertainment tonight while the reality show blows up outside. It's no wonder if a body wants to hide. But no sooner had we made it out of Plato's cave, we started steering the whole planet to an early grave. And just because we can doesn't mean we should. We got a groovy movie, we could try to make the ending good. So let's brainstorm here. Tell me what you envision. The nuclear family or nuclear fission? Should we slowly fade to black or go to blinding whiteout? Should the final track blow us right out of the ballpark and off of the charts? The sky's the limit. We could even shoot the sequel on Mars. Who needs Earth when we could all be stars? Silly monkey. Those aren't stars, they're headlights, and they're heading right for you. Better change your stripes so the next one will floor you. And we got more important things to do than to spend our time being sold to you. There's quite a few of us, too. We're nobody's masters and nobody's slaves. We crave the same oxygen, brave the same knocks, and then breathe again until the last day when there's no breath left to save. Then we creep back to sleep in our caves. The envelope of evolution is pushed by creative mutation, like an extra thumb growing straight out of the imagination. Thank you. Hazel asked me to make a quick show of this because, well, it's sad because there aren't any left, but I may reprint them. Hyena Subpoena was a little folio with a book inside, and that's a handmade lino cut, like print, that Kiva Stymack of Popolo Press did. As I say, there are sadly no more, but we hope to reprint them. I'm going to do a piece from that book now. When we were in South Africa, I know Tanya's just come back from that country. When we were there, spent some time driving around in Kruger Park, and at one point, we were way too close to an angry bull elephant. And you realize you're not even safe in your car from an angry bull elephant. In fact, every year, somebody or other. So what I understood in that moment, when I realized that it wasn't going to be my last, was something about irresistible force. Those moments where you realize, okay, I see. I have no power in this situation whatsoever. So it's called Seeing the Elephant, and in this case, the elephant is the institution of psychiatry, basically, and this is a young girl's appointment with the doctor. And it's called Seeing the Elephant. I guess I said that. When you turn 13, they send you to see a certain Dr. Schwartz, of whom there turn out to be two. As your luck would have it, rather than the city's alleged expert in adolescent psychology, you get the 60-year-old cynic who admits to your mother he has no previous experience with adolescent girls. Jokes he'll likely live the longer for it, then twice alludes to the fact he's heading out on sabbatical as of that afternoon, just as soon as he's finished with you. He has a furrowed brow and a slate-gray beard with two white stripes like tusks growing down from either side of his mouth. Behind him stand cavalcades of leather-bound books with wrinkly knees, embossed in golden filigree on such topics as abnormal psychology and hypnotherapy, plus a few university degrees and a pair of bifocals, all in golden frames. From across the expanse of his dark wooden desk, he raises a bushy brow at you and asks you why you aren't wearing any socks. You didn't feel like wearing socks, was the truth? You're wearing your usual black canvas shoes from Chinatown. They're soft inside, and you didn't feel required socks, actually. But don't you care if your feet get cold? Sounds like a trick question to you. So you sit staring silently at that eyebrow to see if he'll raise it again. But he swivels his gray leather armchair around to a whole new strategy. What's the significance of the little elephant? He asks, waving his index finger over your left closed fist. The little elephant, what's the significance of it? Your hand seems to open automatically, traitorously, revealing a tiny gray elephant of molded plastic, the size of a cat's ear or a toy soldier. A child of some other era has bitten its face, leaving it pockmarked and askew. The truth is that Molly, your best friend in the whole world, who's just been moved to another school because your parents all thought the two of you were spending too much time together, had given you the elephant. So yes, it has all kinds of significance. You're not sure which bits he wants to know and whether it's any of his beeswax, actually. Do you mean what does it represent symbolically, you ask? Symbolism, as you well know, was a literary device by which an object or motif took on a deeper significance than it appeared to have on the surface of things, coming to represent a character's secret fears or desires. This was always one of the most interesting parts of English class, when the teacher would suddenly reveal all the hidden meanings in the story or poem, and you'd wonder whether the writer was putting all that in there on purpose, or whether it was just made up by English teachers so they'd have something fascinating to teach, which might otherwise never occur to most people. Sure, says Dr. Schwartz. What does the elephant symbolize to you? Did you ever see that movie, The Elephant Man? Me and my best friend Molly saw it once. I can't remember the exact words because it was a long time ago, but there's one part where John Merrick, whose name is actually Joseph, like my grandfather, says sometimes he thinks his head is so big because it's so full of thoughts. Then he says, what happens if thoughts can't get out? Maybe his head is lumpy like that because his biggest thoughts are trying to force their way out? So then he makes his little paper church, but the whole time most people still think he's a circus freak, whether they dress him in a tuxedo or lock him in a cage. He just doesn't fit in anywhere. So then at the end of the movie, he looks at these pictures on the wall of his hospital room. There's someone sleeping peacefully, not all propped up on pillows like he has to do, because otherwise he'll either suffocate or break his own neck from the weight of his head. But he moves the pillows away anyhow, just to be like a normal person, even though he knows it might kill him, and it does. He's only 27 when he dies, just like Jimi Hendrix. Any mention of death or suicide is, of course, one of the things Dr. Schwartz is listening for. It doesn't bode well that you identify so strongly with a deformed adult male who died over 100 years ago, but he doesn't have time to probe the issue. He only has the therapeutic hour, which is drawing to a close. He really doesn't know enough about your situation to say whether you're in serious danger of harming yourself or anybody else. But he does know which forms require only his signature to make the whole damn thing not his problem. To him, what you represent is the last piece of paper he has to sign before jumping in a cab to the airport. He's got a bright new Hawaiian print shirt and sunglasses waiting in a desk drawer. Your mother had not expected to be just leaving you there at St. Paul's that afternoon. You don't even have a toothbrush or a change of clothes, she explains, but is told to worry about those things later. They prefer to keep an eye on you, was how they put it. After your mother leaves, they make you change into a flimsy blue gown with no back, then seat you in a wheelchair just to take you down the hall, which at first you think is totally ridiculous. But soon the red syrup they gave you in a cup starts to feel like space travel. They put you in a starchy blue bed, sectioned off by curtains, with a window opening onto the streets of downtown Vancouver. Wouldn't be too difficult to just climb out of here, you think, but then suddenly you fall fast asleep. Your mother didn't know, and neither did you, that appointment would be the first and only time you ever meet this Dr. Schwartz or any other Dr. Schwartz. His only role in the whole downward spiraling snowball was to be the admitting psychiatrist, after which he just disappeared, never to be held accountable for anything that happened to you from that point onward. As though he'd simply backed into a lever, releasing a trap door, and you'd fallen down through a hole in the floor to the world on the other side of the two-way mirror, where everyone knows what you're doing all the time, but somehow they read it all backwards. Thank you. Okay, the next one is also in Kruger Park. This one is actually, well, it's based on two things that happened while we were in South Africa. One of them was we got to visit a elementary school in the township of Kanyamazani and met these incredible kids who were so engaged with being in school at all. And I've taught classes in this side of the ocean where that just really wasn't the case. So anyway, inspiring kids. And also we saw a lioness by the side of the road dying, a dying lion, which was it's an image to deal with. One thinks of a lion as the most, top of the food chain, the most powerful beast. So this is about tables being turned on predator-prey, and it's also about infectious disease. And it's called Lion Queen. Is hope lost, lady? Pride abandon ye by the side of the road, lioness dying alone. Is hope lost, lady? Pride abandon ye by the side of the road, lioness dying alone. On your face still traces of predator grace, never losing your feline refine, even as flies encircle your crown like vultures. They'd pluck out even the eyes of the blind. But I too am a scavenger here, gathering scraps of this ravishing culture until my eyes are filled, spill over, and still can't believe what I'm seeing. Dying lioness. No surprise I've never seen one, but neither do I wish to be the very last thing she sees. We slow the rented go, windows roll down, letting russet dust settle equally on all of us. 2 Canadian aliens, 1 South African lioness. We don't choke the engine, though. Now it's growling at the tattered cat, and it doesn't feel right, listening to the life rattle out of her like a gate chain locking out the night. Not long ago, she was top of her game, the top of the food chain, now slowly consumed by consumption, lying low to the ground like a pup tent, her skin stretching thin over bony ribs. Black lips mutter back to her heart till the very last beat, when the fire in her lion eyes freezes in the heat, and her sight sinks like shiny sunstones deep in riverbeds beneath her lids. The arid air throws dust over my vision, and I swear I see her leaping at the sun, where long ago she must have come from. But none so young deserved this, to wither of illness, invisible nemesis, crippling dignity. She may be a mother with youngsters to feed, like any other hunter gathering food for her brood of hungry cubs. But who'd bother to let the local pride of lions know that the flesh of those Cape buffalo contains a fatal dose of bovine tuberculosis, and that this tenacious germ had recently learned how to leap to her species easily? So, you see, it seems our lion queen is being eaten by something she ate. There may be no greater tragedy, but in the state of nature, it's consumer beware. Even on the savannah, it's a jungle out there. Did she feed poison kill to her children as well? Was she guilty of involuntary regicide when the king of her pride laid claim to the lion's share of the prey, leaving behind just the nasty bits only hyenas would eat anyway? But therein lies the irony of infectious disease. Yeah? Viruses couldn't care less about social hierarchy. Given equal opportunity, diseases would eat every body equally. But look how the eyes of the lioness suddenly widen awake. She's taking me in, never taking her glittering focus away. In a better day, I'd have been breakfast. I heard certain prides have acquired a taste for us, Homo sapiens. Maybe fancy apes make a tasty break from antelopes, such as those skinny impalas, doe-eyed and nubile like a shy herd of schoolgirls with knobbly knees even wider than their thighs. How inviting they must look to those guys higher on the food chain who've got nothing to lose and nothing but a little time to kill. See how their prey stands stock still like fear were the devil it is. A bushfire taking no prisoners, finding no sacrifice too great to feed its fever, if even at the price of a few insignificant lives. But I've heard of this pride who've acquired a taste for human meat. Specifically the flesh of young refugees from Mozambique who get caught trying to sneak over the border through Kruger in hope of seeking South African salaries. We met two of these guys on the road. Like young lions, they were walking, not driving, with nothing but a bottle of water between them. What kind of poverty must they be fleeing to risk being torn limb from limb by wild animals for the slim chance of advancing their financial situations? What else but desperation would make a man lay his life on the line that way? Settling the wager at all or nothing? I saw those shadows of human misery all around me. It likely surrounded me on every side. I didn't have to look for it. But what I generally found was the opposite. A generosity of spirit and easy humor, even where you'd expect to find bitterness. Maybe I was blessed in this, but the question I kept asking is, can it be true? The most important thing to do is to somehow die while alive, then keep living through to the new day, just to sit by the river laughing away like a baby hippopotamus. We saw one. There's a sort of laughter that seems to surface when you believe completely what you're seeing, as though it were being shown. Youthful, joyous, and buoyant, like that of the school children in Kanyamazane who can't stop cracking up at the two Canadians who came to visit them. And yet, concrete walls of bubblegum pink surround their elementary school compound, laced on top with razor wire and emblazoned with hand-painted slogans celebrating freedom and warning against the spread of HIV. The deputy principal asks me to perform a poem in the center of the courtyard where there stands a spreading tree. Now youngsters gather beneath it in clusters like fruit. I choose a poem about meerkats, how they babysit each other's kits, while the watcher keeps a watchful eye for sneaking snakes and swooping eagles. The watcher stays awake to keep the young from harm. If a dangerous stranger comes near, it's the watcher who sounds the alarm. But the rest of the time when the coast is clear, she sings a little peeping song so they'll all know she's still near, and they have nothing to fear as long as they can still hear another peep out of her, and then another. The kids in uniform clap at the end of the poem, then the deputy principal takes a turn of her own at storytelling. It's clearly her calling, her hands spread wide as branches over the circle of children, sweeping them up in her tail of two Canadians who came from far away to visit them, friendly and sweating and smiling, all teeth like two white mice with sunburns. Then the buzzer sounds like a fire alarm, and young boys race to shake my hand like they'd take home some alien germ, while little girls lace fingers through my hair as though it were falling water. I falter in my place then, to see in their faces the fire of their powerful heredity look up at me through laughing eyes. And I shied before their growing shadows, reaching past me to the sun where young lion queens and kings of long ago first came from. Thank you. Woo, was right, eh? Woo! Thank you for being with me. You guys are really great audience. I've got one more poem, and it's my first sort of solo show suite of poems was Sea Peach. And this is a poem about a sea creature who looks like a human heart and lives a sessile existence rooted to the ocean floor. In the context of this poem, it's also a metaphor for love in its groundedness and grace and balance between giving and taking. Usually I would have one up on the, on a screen in the backdrop, which I don't have. I only have a very small postcard size, but you can come and look at it afterward. And I will describe it in great detail during the poem. So. This is called Sea Peach. Love breathes underwater like sea creatures, slow in how it teaches, gliding, grazing like a graceful ray, or an opening anemone, raising tendrils in time to the pulse of the sea and drawing them in again. Its only enemy, that toothy little fish, anxiety, for years had followed me, nipping my Achilles from behind, to remind me of times I was blind to love that never left. When buried, bereft, my heart burrowed low so no one else could bruise it. Didn't know that hiding was the only way to lose it. Since the Ice Age, she's been down in the basement digging through boxes trying to find something she thought she had lost. The original skin of shape-shifting foxes, the thing she swore not to lose at any cost. She'd come to believe she was not a real person, maybe a creature someone put a curse on, assuming human form, to learn a lesson while she's here. A shapeshifter, a drifter, more at home roaming open fields alone than tethered to another and living under cover in a room no matter how warm. She'd come to miss the furred perk of her alert ears, magic broomstick of her tail, her padded paws turning circles thrice before she sleeps. But whatever original skin she was born with is hidden away somewhere in a box, so no human lover would ever discover she's not actually a girl, but a fox. One who walks and talks like a regular girl, but if she falls in love, that's the end of the world for her. The permanent transfer from one life form to another. If love ever uncovered her original skin, well, she might never fit back into it again, slip into it and slink out the door. She might never be the same as she was before. And then she met you. And she wasn't afraid. Though you didn't feel like a choice, she had made it first more like a kind of emotion or expulsion from the secret garden of her discontent. You must have been heaven sent. She'd prayed for answers from the sky, but looked to earth for her reply. The nodding God of yes, who was so welcome in your eye. Your heart beat a happy tattoo, and she opened the door, and yes, it was true. Nothing was the same as it had been before you. Like shiny scales of goldfish, you opened eyes on her skin, and they wept out oceans lying within. But old loves fled away to make room for a new one. Didn't think she had it left in her to even pursue one, and recent questions as to whether she was even human. And letters that she didn't send. Love she swore would never end. Apology calls she didn't make. Love's lost or tossed by blind mistake. And all the roads she didn't take. Love is the one who's hard to find. Love is the one who knows your mind. Love's the one who feeds your soul. Love's the one to have and hold. But hold a minute, hold how? There's 100 hungry ways to hold her up or hold her down. Will she still be able to get around? Will she be able to hold her ground? So she digs down deep to the bottom of the box to find the original hide of the fox, and it's there all right. Despite paranoia, some lover would thieve it, slip it on and slink away. The choice was always hers to retrieve it. But who wears furs these days? Perhaps her fears had fallen out of fashion. Perhaps there were more human ways of nourishing a passion. But look, there beneath the fox at the bottom of the box, a book about biology. And being a student of life, she took hold of it in her own hands. She let it unfold in hopes it would offer that lesson to teach. It fell open to the name Halocynthia aurantium, or in more common terms, the sea peach. The sea peach is a creature who looks like a heart living at the bottom of the ocean, rooted in place by a sucker on its underpart, grounded, holding steady as devotion. Its evolution has chosen this sort of lifestyle. Halocynthia aurantium in luminous hues of a peach chrysanthemum by sublime chance or divine artistry, with two branching siphons raised overhead like the aorta and the pulmonary artery, one to take things in, one to give things out. The sea peach teaches what the heart is about. Through its two siphons, the sea peach feeds, breeds, and breathes, taking in food and oxygen, inspiration, exhaling tiny tadpoles to the tide, who reroute themselves elsewhere in some other place. All this from a creature who has no face, no crises of identity, the ability to simply be. No mind, but no matter. None of the clatter and chatter of the human brain. No broken-hearted sea peach ever drove itself insane, and its offers of asylum have no locks on either side. So she chose the book of life and closed the box on the fox hide. Phylum Chordata. The sea peach is a chordate, just like me, and the marine iguana, and the great horned toad, and the chimpanzee, which means we all have spinal structures, just like you, the giant squid, the gerbil, and the caribou. Each who shares the chordate name starts out looking pretty much the same, at least in our prenatal form. Then we start to shift our shapes as we're born. From guinea hens to wide-mouthed bass, we all begin as tadpoles with something like a head and something like a tail. Headstrong and wriggling just like the rest of us. Prairie chickens, Gila monsters, Arctic perch and hippopotamus, cheetahs, horses, salamanders, goats and stoats and geese and ganders, and the sea peach too, to name but a few. We all start out from heads and tails, but it's here in evolution that the sea peach derails. It doesn't grow a spine, and it doesn't grow a face. It only grows a sucker to ground itself in place. Like a heart who hears the murmur of its purpose here on earth, it finds a spot of ocean floor and settles toward rebirth. She studies the sea peach a very long time until it seems she'd almost become one. Well, not in the sense of losing her spine, but the sense of trusting in someone. First comes a voice, and then comes the choice. Maybe it comes from within and it ripples without, and quietly it tells you what your life is about in murmured whispers thumping somewhere in your chest. Or it starts from without and it touches within, and it opens up a million tiny eyes on your skin. And you can see clearly now. Thank you so much